So my name is 𝗍𝗶𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂. I'm the mentoring lead for Women in Mining South Africa. 𝗍𝗶𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂 is a non-profit organization, and we do mentoring, coaching, networking events, talk at conferences, learn soft skills, bridging the gap between students and newly graduates, and give career days to school children and tell them more about the STEM industries and why they should be going into the science, technology, engineering, and mining industry. And tonight we're having our second Inspired Insights for the year, and it will be on the biology of belief with 𝗍𝗲𝗍𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂, who is also a master coach. She has a degree in psychology and a Heal Your Life teacher. And I'm very excited to hear about tonight. The question on the post was to say, could it be that simple to change your thoughts by changing your reality? To change your thoughts, you can change your reality. And we'll hear from 𝗍𝗲𝗍𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂 scientific evidence and how our genes can be influenced by our thoughts and beliefs. And in doing so, empower you to take control of your health and well-being. So thank you, 𝗍𝗲𝗍𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂, for tonight's session. I'm excited and we can kick off.
Thanks and welcome everyone. Thanks for that introduction as well. Just so you know, I like to just refer to myself as 𝗍𝗲𝗍𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂, and I am inspired by many schools of thoughts, methodologies, psychology, coaching, as well as counseling practices. But I believe that there is no one way to get to an outcome. So my reason for drawing from many different philosophies and methodologies is so that I have the ability to navigate and pivot according to the person who sits in front of me. And one of the reasons why Raksha actually reached out to me and asked whether I would be willing to give these little talks once a month is so that we can start a conversation, because a lot of us actually look at each other and we see different people, but we're all at the end of the day struggling with very similar things, and we're struggling alone. So the more that we're able to have more knowledge, more perspectives, the more we actually bring each other closer together to start conversations and have the confidence to have conversations. So the objective of these chats is to just open your mind, not to necessarily change your mind, but to open your mind to consider different perspectives and to just, be kind, start a conversation. Remember that the person sitting next to you might be smiling, but might also be going through a very vulnerable time. So we're all carrying crosses, proverbial crosses. Hello, there's a new face. Nice to see faces pop up. Hi, Sanalo. Did you want to say something?
Just put in the chat that they can put on their cameras.
Yeah, that would be great. It's nice to see faces, but I believe some people are on their phones and have limited data. So that's why sometimes they switch their camera off, although I also love to see everybody's face. It is a preference. It gives me an indication if I'm putting you guys to sleep or not, you see. Okay.
I'm still awake.
So
we're wide awake.
So let's kick off. I put this picture as an opening picture. I think a lot of us have seen this picture before, but it really kind of sums up the whole essence of why we would investigate our thoughts or even the biology of belief. Because if we're not aware of what's going on here, we're not aware of what we're putting out there, and then we might not even be aware of why life is happening the way it is. So even though we might look like a little kitty cat, there might be a lion inside of us waiting to come out. So what do you guys think is this concept of the biology of belief? I know some of you said you were curious by the word biology. Others have just shown up to go, let me go see what this is about. Maybe some of you have actually gone and Googled biology of belief and come across something. I'm curious to know, just to sort of get the conversation going, And even if you don't know, take a guess. What do you think this concept of the biology of belief is about?
I guess I didn't
Sorry.
put my hand up, but I guess what we believe in life, how you were brought up, sort of channels you into how you view the world, how you view things, how you interact with the world because of your belief system. So sometimes, we can be locked in a bubble because of our belief system. We only know what we've been taught. But little do we know that there's so much out there, and we explore as we grow, as we, meet people.
And where does the word biology fit in then? Why biology? Well, what does that kind of tell you? Okay, we've got you thinking. That's good. All right, guys. Well, let's introduce you to Dr. Bruce Lipton, who actually coined this term, the biology of belief. And I thought let's start with a little video, just a short little video, so that you can be introduced to him and his thinking.
Veronique, Sanala also raised her hand.
Oh, sorry.
Apologies.
Okay.
If we quickly
I
want to give her
can't
a chance as
see
well.
that. Yeah, forgive me.
No worries. We can't hear you, Sanalo. No, we can't hear you. Okay, we'll give you some time to sort out, and then Veronique can show us the video, and then maybe you can give us a response in, is that what you were thinking, and what you wanted to answer on. So let's go ahead, Veronique.
Okay.
Over 40 years ago, I was cloning stem cells, and one of the first experiments just so blew my mind that it really changed the whole course of my education and my life. I put one stem cell in a culture dish all by itself, and that stem cell divides every 10 to 12 hours. After about a week to 10 days, I have thousands of cells in the petri dish, but what's most important is all these cells are genetically identical to each other. And then what I did, and this is the experiment, I separated a culture of genetically identical cells into 3 different petri dishes, and I changed the environment. But the culture medium to cells is like the world that we live in. It's got the air, the water, the food, all the things in it. So I had 3 different environments, yet genetically identical cells in each dish, and the results revealed that in environment A, the cells form muscle, in environment B, the cells form bone, and in environment C, the cells form fat cells. What was so profoundly important about this is if you ask the question, what is responsible for controlling the fate of the cells, what the experiment clearly revealed was that all the cells were genetically identical. The only thing that was different from one dish to the other dish was the environment. So while at the time I was teaching medical students the conventional story out of the textbook, the concept of genetic determinism, that genes control our fate and our lives, my experiments revealed a completely different story, and that was, it was the environment that was primarily responsible in shaping the behavior and genetics.
So that is quite mind-blowing, right? And quite contrary to what in essence we've been taught and indoctrinated over the last few decades and possibly even century. That so often, for example, when we're sick, we're told we are not in control of that. We have to go and see a doctor, and the doctor will fix it because that is what our genes have determined for us. So if we think that it's not just our genes now, but actually the environment in which we as cellular or beings made up of cells are influenced by, then how can we use that to our advantage? And this is really where Dr. Bruce Lipton's research and investigation started, which today now is known as epigenetics and has become quite a buzzword. And it really focuses on how your behaviors and the environment can cause changes that affect the way that your genes work. So what does that mean? It means that you no longer just sort of, this is it, I'm stuck with this and I got to accept it, and the rest of my life is now, this is it. What it actually means is that whilst your DNA and your genes don't fundamentally change, your environment can actually influence the way that they behave and show up, and the way that your DNA reads what goes on. So that now puts you in a very different position, in a position of power really, because then if you become aware of your environment, what's going on and how you are showing up in the world, it also potentially equips you to change that and direct the life you want or that you wish to have. So that then brings up the topic of nature versus nurture. And does anybody want to give a go at what they think the difference is? I think these are familiar concepts, but would anyone like to clarify and get involved?
I can't. From what I've read and seen from Dr. Caroline Leaf's books and videos, for instance, is how she shows the exact same brain folds that's in your brain, and how negative thoughts can form them in a healthy in an unhealthy manner, and how positive thoughts can change them to have a healthier brain. That's how I could explain it.
Yes, and what you're picking up actually affects both of these. But as a starting point, so your nature is what you're born with. So your DNA doesn't change. Okay, and your genes generally don't change unless there's been some fundamental disease or trauma or something that has impacted your development or your creation. But generally speaking, the nature of who you are fundamentally, let's call it your computer hardware and operational system, is fundamentally what it is. Like if you went to the shop and bought the computer, and we'll get to that in a second, but that is what it is. However, the way that you show up and how you function in the world very often is influenced by how you are nurtured. And the example here is there's a little plant, there's some young hands and there's some slightly older hands. You can see that there's teachings, there's guidance, there's love, there's compassion. But in the same way, if there is trauma, or if there is stuff that has been dogmatically pumped into you, or belief systems, or you've been through a lot of pain or neglect or hurt, and sometimes even not big hurts, it can fundamentally define and influence how you show up in the world. So a lot of people think that these two are one and the same thing, and that they think that just because they are born a particular way means that that is how they're going to show up for the rest of their life. But if you actually become consciously aware and start getting curious and observing this, you might find that naturally you're actually a completely different person, but the nurturing in your life actually caused you to go astray. And therefore that allows you the choice to make different choices and create a different life or show up differently. So let's explore that a little bit further. The key thing to note is that the problem comes in when your body or your mind or this system that we're in has been incorrectly programmed. So you'll see you've got your DNA and you've got your genes and you've got the body that you're born with. But if you've been nurtured in a way that is not aligned with your operating system, then you're going to face problems. Some might say that as soon as you feel that you are stuck, that you're noticing patterns in relationships, the same thing keeps happening over and over again. You're experiencing anything but a sense of flow and ease or a sense of safety. Some might say that you are being indirectly guided towards considering what's really going on, because your operating system may not be aligned with who you are and how you're meant to be. So I'll give you a few examples. If you grew up in a family where girls were supposed to keep quiet and let the men take charge, this girl or you may grow up to unconsciously be very submissive towards men. And in a very male-dominated environment, such as the mining environment, you may even struggle with things like imposter syndrome when you start to do well and you start to achieve, because from a very young age, you were indoctrinated to believe that you need to be submissive to men and you must keep quiet. Another example could be if you grew up in a family where you had very critical parents, or a very critical parent, one or both, or maybe no parents, but a very critical grandparent. And nothing you ever did seemed to feel like it was ever right or good enough. You then may grow up and unconsciously become a people pleaser, someone who struggles to say no, someone that doesn't know where her boundaries are. You might often feel really tired and get burnout and secretly resent a lot of people and even the tasks that you do, because you feel like you're unseen, unheard, unappreciated for all the extra effort and passion and detail that you put in everything that you do. Another example might be that if you're a kid growing up and every time something good happened and you had a mom that suffered from depression and she secretively didn't want anybody else to be happy because she was so depressed, so she would try and ruin it for you or make you feel guilty or tell you, how can you be happy when you can see that I'm hurting or sad or struggling? You might have learned to unconsciously sabotage joy in your life. And every time you just feel like you're getting to joy or you're getting a taste of joy, it always seems out of reach. It always seems just a little bit out of reach. Another example could be that if you were a kid, every time you asked a question or you wanted to know why, just because you were curious, you were smacked or hit over the head or told to keep quiet, or maybe verbally abused for back-chatting or being disrespectful. You may actually unconsciously grow up to be an adult that hardly speaks, that never asks questions, and that shies away from voicing a point of view. Those quiet people in the meeting room. Another example might be that if you or your body doesn't know what to do with the trauma or the pain or the hard experiences or the overwhelm or the feelings or the stress that you've endured, you may have unconsciously tucked all of that away and dissociated from it. And in turn, your body may turn on itself in the form of any kind of disease, but for example, autoimmune diseases, cancer, or other physical or mental illnesses. That's your body's way of saying, I can't actually cope with this anymore. Other people might actually use addictions to suppress or avoid stuff. But having looked at these 5 examples, what did you guys notice that they all had in common? Did somebody write something in the chat room? I think there was an added. I just see it's number. Oh, was that an old one? I just saw there's 2 now. Yeah, what did you guys notice that all of these examples had in common? Ooh, letters. Were you too busy
Yes,
relating?
yeah. You can go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so my observation was that with every negative interaction we have with life, there's always like an outcome that your body or your mind, it will hold on to whatever you've experienced and it will show up as that. So, I mean, there were those examples that you gave us. So, which then tells me that really what happens in our lives or in our childhood actually catches up with us, eh? So nothing just happens and all goes well. I don't know if it does happen in psychology, but it looks like how our journey of life happens. At some point, it just catches up either positively or negatively.
Carl Jung called that the midlife crisis. Another thing that Carl Jung said, Carl Jung was Freud's protege, and he said, we spend the first half of our life trying to learn things to keep the people we loved happy. Then we hit a midlife crisis, and then we spend the next half of our life trying to unlearn that stuff so we can find our own happiness. But I go off for a second.
I think I'm there.
Congratulations, probably perfectly on time. If you're between 35 and 45, that's usually perfectly on time. So, yeah.
So is it also
Okay.
a protective mechanism to try and avoid that trauma again? So the unconscious behavior becomes like the protective mechanism to not have those same feelings.
Shanae, you're jumping ahead. Woo!
It's like a big textbook.
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay. But you guys, the 5 examples I gave, I even bolded the word that I wanted you all to notice, that they all had in common.
Obvious, Bernie.
It's not unconsciously.
Yes, thank you. Thank you,
Yes.
Topandula. Somebody noticed. Okay. So you would have noticed that the word that I highlighted was unconsciously. So it's important to notice that unconsciously and unconscious are 2 very different. They seem very similar, but they have very different meanings. And in the case of the examples, I use the word unconsciously quite on purpose, because unconsciously is without realizing or being aware of one's choices, decisions, and how they impact ourselves or our actions. So it's you're not aware that you're actually doing this thing. So, if you're a kid, in most of those examples, I use ourselves as a kid. When you're a kid, you're not aware. You're trying to survive. You're trying to look at these adults and these situations and stuff and cope. But the problem is that's when we develop those coping skills and mechanisms unconsciously. And the midlife crisis that you guys are referring to is when we start to wake up and we go, so this coping stuff that I've been using for the first half of my life is now no longer really aligning with what I want. It's not working for me anymore. And that's when the conflict and the questions and do I quit my job? Do I go on a sabbatical? Do I get divorced? Do I get a boyfriend half my age? Or do I get a motorbike and go travel around Europe in a bikini, So it's important to recognize that we're talking about unconsciously without realizing or being aware of one's choices or decisions at that point in our life. Which brings me on to the iceberg. And I'm sure you guys have all, seen the iceberg theory, the little bits that we see about ourselves and people on the surface versus what's really going on underneath. And it's very important to talk about this now, because it distinguishes between the unconsciously I was just referring to, which was an unaware choice, versus the unconscious, which is really the part of us that we don't really have much control over. So you'll see I put the little picture of the DNA in the corner there. So we don't really have any kind of conscious awareness of this. We don't really ever tap into the unconscious per se. This is where the autonomic nervous system sits, your breathing, your heartbeat, your immune system, and all of those sort of unconscious functions that the body has. But it's not entirely untappable, because as you saw with the video that we watched about Bruce Lipton, where he said that when you actually start to become aware of your environment and the way that you show up in the world and your thoughts and everything, you can then have an impact on the way the DNA is interpreted or brought out into reality and the way the genes show up, which means it has an influence on your ability to be healthy. So you'll find that people with autoimmune diseases or cancer often struggle with different forms of anger, where autoimmune disease is often anger turned inward, but somebody didn't even know that they were angry. They just sort of bottled stuff up. They're completely unaware of it. Whereas people that get cancer very often know what they're angry about and they ruminate on it, but they don't know how to resolve it or let it go. So it eats away at them, for example. Okay. Oops. So then the next layer up is what's known as the subconscious. And this is the important area to become aware of. Because this is where our beliefs, our patterns, our habits, our fears, our values, our physical emotions, our intuition. Shanae was talking about getting protective. Yes, this is where that sits as well. And it's important to note that some of these programmed beliefs or even feelings or values or fears may be real, but some of them may also be imagined. And if we don't know the difference, or if we're not aware of it, we can often bring this stuff that from the past into a present moment and project it onto a person, a partner, a workspace, something that we're studying or whatnot, and actually sabotage it. Like, for example, the girls whose mother was depressed, she won't allow herself to get happy because the programming is that if I get happy, you know, I'm going to be hurt and knocked back down off my pedestal because I mustn't be happy and so forth. The long-term memory also sits here in the subconscious. So the whole point of the development of this part of your brain is to attempt to keep you safe. So that is what I think Shanae was talking to. Your brain holds on to every single experience from conception and sometimes even from before that it has gone through. And it will remember that and use that, whether you're aware of it or not, to try and attempt to keep you safe, whether that is to keep you quiet, whether that is to make you fight, whether that is to keep you sad, whether that is, you know, to keep you driving for more and more and more, whether that is because you can't say no because you got to keep everyone happy. This is all programmed into you. It's also important to know that this part of your brain very often overrides or hijacks what is happening in your reality right now. So I'm sure we can all think of examples where we're like, oh, I'm never going to do that again, or this is my last cigarette, or I'm not drinking anymore, or I'm done with sugar. And then like half an hour later, you're like putting 3 spoons of sugar in your tea, or, you know, you back on that cigarette and bought another box with the excuse of it's my last one, or whatever the case may be. Okay, so you can see how the subconscious, if we're not aware of what's going on there, will very quickly hijack the reality of the current moment, which brings us onto the conscious. Now, this is an interesting one because a lot of people think that just because they are awake means they're conscious. But I can tell you from the work that I do, and I'm sure you guys have all been in relationships where you're like, is this person for real? You can see that somebody's awake, but they're completely oblivious to what is coming out of their mouth or how they're showing up in the world. And nobody, not one of us in this room actually comes out of that unscathed because we're all guilty of it to some degree or another. In our conscious waking moment, the short-term memory is at play. So you would notice things that you see around you today in the car or whatnot. Half an hour later, you may have forgotten about them, right? But you do experience thoughts and feelings. You use your critical thinking. You make decisions in the second of the moment. There's a lot of information coming in, and this conscious mind, this open eyes, your 5 senses and stuff, will also then link with your subconscious. Now, if something in the present moment is happening that triggers the subconscious to a memory from way back when, where it was painful or hurtful, even though this moment may not be the case, our body and our mind might just go, whoops, I'm sensing something, I've seen this before, and just go into auto drive. And this is where I know every single one of us have gone, I'm never going to do that again. And then it happens, and then you're like, oh my God, how did I do that again? You know, because we've gone into auto drive. And that is exactly that. So you would notice that next to the subconscious section, I've popped the nurturing image. So this is the part where the environment that we've grown up in, the media that we've been exposed to, the religions that we've been exposed to, the pains, the hurts, the everything that we've been exposed to in our environment would have had an impact on our programming to shape those beliefs and patterns and habits. And if we do not use our conscious awareness, then we will never get to that to be able to interrogate it and go, is this aligned with who I am or not? Now, when we hit that midlife crisis that the other lady, sorry, I forgot that lady's name, mentioned, we're starting to see that what we're experiencing in our daily life, who we were born to be in terms of DNA, and how we've programmed to show up are now no longer in alignment. And that is the point. I don't particularly like this word because it's a bit overused, but that is when we start to wake up, which is otherwise known as woke. And the important thing is that when we are becoming woke and we become aware of our thoughts, what we're thinking, what we're saying, our patterns, our behavior, and we're going, is this aligned with where I want to be or not? Where did this come from? When was the first time that I experienced this or whatnot? We can start to, you would have noticed, I've made it red, we can start to reprogram our subconscious. And that is the beginning of us being able to take charge and create a life and shape a life that is aligned within ourselves and what we were born to be, but also what we want and desire. So I like to use the analogy of a computer because we're somewhat like a computer. When you go shopping for a computer, and I'd like to use this analogy just to bring this whole concept home to you guys. When you go buy a computer, like I have a love for Apple, the Apple comes with all the software. So if I want to do video editing or picture editing or, cameras or make videos or whatnot, it comes standard. So yes, you pay a little bit more, but everything is on there. I don't have to worry about buying more softwares. I don't have to worry about antiviruses and stuff like that. So you get this operating system. Okay, it's this hardware with a memory and an operating system. The hardware also with this memory, it has an empty memory. So if we compare that to a human being, you've got this operating system and your brain is the memory part of the hard drive that is completely empty. Babies don't come out of the womb chatting with stories and experiences and stuff. They have an empty brain. There are no thoughts. They don't even have shame or anything. They don't go, oh, I can't poop now. What are people going to think? Or that nappy just doesn't bring out my eyes. They don't do stuff like that. They are just a pure operating system that is absolutely fresh and pure to function in all its glory. Now, if we start putting stuff into that memory and into that hard drive, like software, like photos, like other apps and whatnot, and if they are not aligned with the operating system that that computer was designed to cope with, that computer is going to start malfunctioning. It's not going to work optimally. It's not going to have enough power supply. It's going to hang. It's going to get viruses. It's going to get, like on an Apple, the what they call the rainbow wheel of death and all these kind of things. And human beings are exactly the same. So if we've grown up and the stuff that has been programmed into us over the years because of religion, media, parents who were well-meaning and didn't know what to do, or possibly didn't have a choice because they had to work or whatnot, we may have put stuff into our hard drive and into our operating system that actually is no longer aligned with us. So if that is the case, then that wrong software or that overloading of the hard drive, or that, or if we don't charge it and if we don't look after the computer properly, then it's not going to function optimally in the same way as we wouldn't. And it may catch viruses, or worse, it'll malfunction and crash. And human beings, we can also malfunction. We get psychoses, we get diseases, we get mental problems, and then they get diagnosed. but they don't actually get resolved. The difference is if you take a computer to a computer shop, they actually get to the root cause and remove the virus or remove the software that doesn't work. With us, we get a pill and pretend it's not there, and then do that for another 10 years, and then wonder why after 5 or 10 years we can't function at all. And then we crash. Or some people do other horrible, desperate things. So only when we actually make the subconscious drivers conscious are we empowered to truly take charge of our lives, or to change or to evolve our lives, or to influence our lives to serve what we truly want, need, and deserve. Even, as Bruce Lipton says, to the extent that we may even impact our biology, our genes and our DNA, and how those are interpreted and actually perform and show up in our physical beings, like the immune system. And then Mum Louise Hay, bless her soul, she died not too long ago. That's one of the courses that I also do. But I wanted to share this snippet with you guys because her story is incredible. She survived cancer twice. She was molested. She was raped. She was a model that was married to a man who suddenly left her for a younger model, and she was left high and dry. And when the AIDS or HIV pandemic hit in the late 70s, early 80s in America, she was one of the first people that actually opened her arms and gave a safe space for these people who were kind of shunned by the American society to go over there and die because they've got something that we don't know how to deal with. And using a lot of the teachings of becoming aware of your thoughts and what comes out of your mouth and how you show up in the world has an influence on how healthy, etc., that you can be. So here's just a little video that I think talks to that.
Every thought we think and every word we speak is creating our future. It's as though our thoughts go out into the universe and are accepted and brought back to us as experience. Now, that is a very simple thing, but most people don't get it. They don't understand it. They've never heard it before, and they think it's ridiculous. But if you can really accept the fact that every time you think a thought and every time you speak a word, you are literally painting your future, making your dinner, whatever you want to call it. You are creating, and you're creating your own life. And this is simple, but it's not easy to accept. But once you accept it, then you can start deliberately creating what you want in your life. And you begin to be aware of what you don't want in your life and how you are contributing to it.
I love the analogy that she uses of seeds. And she says, if you can imagine that every word that you speak or every thought that you think is a seed that you are planting in your garden of life. And if you become aware of those thoughts as seeds, you can kind of go, is that a seed I want in my life? So if you often find yourself thinking, for example, I'm lonely or I'm not successful, stop for a moment and go, is that a seed I want to plant in my garden of life? If the answer is no, then don't plant that seed. Then rather plant a thought of a seed that you do want to, blossom and grow in your garden of life. So you really have the power within you to heal yourself, to change yourself, and to even create the life that you want, desire, and deserve. And it really begins with your deliberate and conscious awareness of your thoughts, your beliefs, and your patterns. And from there, anything is possible. And life will truly pleasantly surprise you. I promise you that. And I could tell you some personal experiences, but I really do promise you that. So let's discuss. Are there any questions? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's open the room for discussion and see some faces.
Maybe I'll start it off. I have a question with regards to the subconscious. Is as much as I believe I'm a positive person, but you have a lot of things going on, but your body still holds the stress. Is that the subconscious, or what part is that? Very neat.
It would be sitting in the subconscious, yeah. So obviously your genes and your DNA and stuff will also feel the brunt of that, but that stuff which is trauma related is sitting in your subconscious. So that's the life experiences that your body is trying to process. So if it's dissociated and not actually worked through, then it sits there. And then it will show up and try and protect you. Every time it sees a threat of every time you experience something similar, your body will go, oh, there's that thing, and it will go into auto drive.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any other questions in the room, or comments or experiences that you would like to share?
Alexa looks captivated. I'm curious to know what she's thinking.
So great, really great input. Thank you so much for that. So I'm just curious, with your stress response, does that sit in the unconscious?
No, subconscious.
Okay.
Remember when we spoke about we unconsciously create patterns and ways of coping. So that's why often people think it's unconscious. So it's not in your awareness, but it's not sitting in your unconscious operating system.
Okay.
Does that make sense? If I go back, I can go back to that slide. But the unconscious part of our brain that we very rarely tap into is the one that handles, like, it tells us to breathe and it gets the blood pumping. We don't really need to go there. But we unconsciously pick up patterns and ways of showing up in the world to try and cope and survive. And it's those patterns that sit in the subconscious, so one layer below the conscious, which can have an impact on the unconscious. Because if your brain is always in survival mode or in fear mode, it is going to have an effect on your breathing, on your sweating, on your ability to sleep and so forth, that you're not actually ever consciously programming or in charge of. So the key is to first, at a conscious level, become aware of your thoughts. What are you thinking? And then from there, you can start to notice patterns. You start to notice patterns in relationships, in work, in the way that you respond to certain things. And then you can start going, okay, where did I first start doing this? And you might have a memory from childhood, or you might notice an emotional pattern that is drawing attention that wants resolve. And you'll find that when with that awareness, you can then change that patterning. You can then change the way that you're showing up or dealing with that stuff, which will then have an impact also on your unconscious systems, which include health and breathing and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So would you say
that's why
a prolonged subconscious trauma will affect the unconscious, which is now the
it
health
doesn't necessarily have to be prolonged. It can be a once-off event, or it can be a prolonged event. But people very often think that the traumas that have a monumental impact in our lives are, for example, a rape or a hijacking, or if you're in a war or you got held up by gunpoint, or whatever the case may be. People underestimate, and it's almost been, I would go as far as to say, toxically normalized in the Western world, that when you, for example, are neglected by parents, or you have absent parents, or you have criticism, for the first 15 years of your life, constant hacking and criticism, that often is not even perceived as trauma. But for a developing child with a developing brain, remember, your brain only fully develops when you're about 21, 23 years old. So if you're constantly being criticized, you're constantly in fear, maybe you don't have food, maybe you don't have electricity, maybe you don't know if your mother's going to come home. The child in a developmental stage will experience a lot of fear and potentially even anger and not know how to deal with that. And that has an impact on the development and how you show up as an adult eventually. But very often that's not talked about as trauma because nothing monumentally bad happened. But very often it's that prolonged sort of subtler trauma that has a much bigger impact on our health and the way we show up in the world and engage in our relationships, or possibly struggle to even have relationships or trust.
I think your head was really powerful, like mind-blowing when you spoke about the seed. And to really think about, do I want to plant that seed? And I'm going to catch myself this week. Like,
so Shana,
saying.
you're a visual person, very clearly.
Yes. I saw
Katie.
Sinalu put her camera on and unmuted her, so maybe we can give her a chance first.
Yes, okay.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you for that, Veronique. And you mentioned something interesting about a midlife crisis. I wanted to find out quickly if there's anything like a quarter life crisis, because I'm not, I'm not even in my 30s. I'm far away from 30, and well, not too far away, but I have those questions. Do I need to now quit my job? What do I do? Is there anything like a quarter life crisis? And my other question, you've sort of answered it. I was going to ask, how do we then practically on a daily basis bring awareness to our traumas, especially if you're someone who doesn't know what traumatized you? Like, like you have issues, but you don't really, you can't pin it down. You don't really know what happened to you. How do you practically figure that out or navigate?
Very good questions. Thank you. Okay, so the first one, remember I mentioned Carl Jung. Do you know who Carl Jung is? Have you heard of Sigmund Freud?
Ooh. No, I haven't heard of those names yet.
So Sigmund Freud was known as the father of psychology. He kind of popularized psychology, okay? And Carl Jung was kind of his protege that he was grooming to take over from him, until they eventually had a fallout and they separated ways, and they developed two different perspectives or views on psychology and psychiatry. But the reason why I'm mentioning it is, so Carl Jung coined that phrase of a midlife crisis. But remember, we're talking about 100 years ago, possibly even a bit more. I'm not sure on the dates exactly. Life was a lot slower then. Okay, so on average, up until not too long ago, an adult would come into maturity and stuff. You'd be married by about 20, 25 and having kids at 25. These days, even that doesn't happen, right? So by the time you're going through the stages, you would be 35 to 45, and around about there, you'd be having a midlife crisis. In the last sort of 20 years, the way that we have sped up living, everything is now, everything is instant gratification. There's no waiting. Everything is rushed. Everything is 24-hour turnaround. So people are sort of progressing in terms of growing up much quicker in terms of responsibility and showing up in the world. But emotionally, we're still human beings that require time and effort and understanding. So if you're telling me that you're feeling a lot of that conflict inside and that something is off and you haven't reached 35 yet, then that doesn't mean that you're having a quarter life crisis. It probably just means that you are ahead of the proverbial old school formula or schedule, and you're buying yourself some time. In fact, I've got clients these days who are in their early 20s who could be considered to be going through a midlife crisis. And all that a midlife crisis is really when you start to realize that the life that you're living, the way that you're showing up in the world, the way that you're functioning, you get that feeling of something is off, something is not right. Should I get divorced? Should I change my job? Am I even doing the work that I'm supposed to be doing? Is there a God? Because I don't feel like he's listening to me. When you start asking all of those kind of questions where it's almost an existential crisis, then what's happening is who you were born to be and who you created to survive is at conflict. And it's a great place to be in. So be excited. And I love, I mean, not that, like, I am going to drop a hint, so let's just be forward about that. I love working with people at that point because selfishly, when they figure that out and I watch them blossom, it's very rewarding for people like myself and the work that we do. To answer your other question, I'm going to go back to that slide, if you don't mind. Let me share that slide again.
So I would like to add on, Veronique, and also in terms of a question before you move on to the next question, is am I right in saying then that a midlife crisis would be considered where you are so aware of your subconscious and the trauma that you want to start fixing it already, and you're so aware of it that you want to deal with it now, because that's when you want to start unlearning the past things. Is that?
So therapy conventionally has always tried to go and look back and figure out where did the trauma start and what's going on, etc., etc., etc. And in the past, when we had a lot of time, I suppose we could do that, okay? But in today's world, we don't always have a lot of time. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't always have the patience to sit for hours and hours and talk about what has been, okay? So the newer way of dealing with this stuff is rather to work with where are we at now? So I love that you've said become aware of your patterns and your beliefs and stuff, because when you're doing that, you're working with the now. What is working for me? What isn't working for me? What patterns am I noticing? Am I attracting the same sort of guy and then pushing him away because I actually don't want that? You know, am I in denial about certain things? Am I saying I want to do this, but then I do the opposite? Am I saying I want to be free and I want to be walking around with no bra, barefoot, but I keep finding myself in positions and jobs where I'm wearing tight clothes and high heel shoes, and it's not a space where I can feel free. So now you start to become aware of what's going on in your present moment, right? So that is playing in this area over here in the subconscious. You can start to, with that awareness, also create new ways of being. But to answer Sonalo's question, and this is the important part, sometimes you will never remember what you tucked away in your mind. So if you're working with a therapist or you're trying to figure out what happened to me, you might actually, number one, waste time, waste a lot of money, and you might also never actually get to an answer. But that doesn't mean that you can't create a new way of being, because the more that you are aware in your conscious state, and the more you become aware of your subconscious state, the more confident and safe you feel in your body and in your existence. And your mind will volunteer memories when it feels that you are ready to deal with them. So my advice, if I may give advice, never go and look for potential trauma, because you might actually re-traumatize yourself and you might actually push that pain or that trauma even further away to actually resolving it. Work on being present and working with what you have to work with in the present moment, and use that to empower you, strengthen you, and get you to feel safe. The rest will come when you're ready for it, and the rest will fall into place. Does that answer your questions?
I see. Unfortunately, Sonalo dropped off. I don't know. Oh, there, she's back. Yay.
Is she back?
Yes.
Sonalo, did that answer your questions?
Thank you, Veronique. Yes, the first one, thank you very much for that. But for the second part, I sort of missed a bigger part of it. But thank you very much for that. I dropped off a little bit there.
I saw that. We saw that. The recording will go onto the YouTube channel. So I don't want to repeat myself because there are other people in the group, if you don't mind. So I don't want to disrespect the other people who are here today. But if there is anything that's still unclear, you're welcome to reach out to me.
Okay, thank you very much for
Yes,
that.
and I actually wanted to add on that you asked the question, how do we deal with it, Sinalo? And this is the perfect person to chat to, is Veronique, to have some sessions, individual sessions with her, to find out how you can deal with the quarter life crisis or the midlife crisis, or just finding out how to be conscious and deal with the now and how you're going forward.
You're going to make me
Beautiful.
blush.
Thank you so
much. So Katie had her hand up. Caitlin, do you still want to add on or ask a question?
No, I'm okay, thank you.
Okay, great.
She retracted her question. Aw, I love questions. Who else has questions or thoughts or challenges to share, or maybe even a personal story? Like as I took you through the slides, maybe you guys could relate to something. Maybe you would like to share something. Yeah.
Yeah,
Frida with the funky
me,
glasses.
yes, me with the funky glasses. Yeah, I think for me, the nature and the other slide, it resonated with my experiences, because what I've seen, that I could never understand it, that how is it that children of the same household, you grow up under the same roof, same parents, and maybe one of you moves out, and then you shaped, we nurtured differently, and you meet up after a while, and you realize how different you actually are, and that has always been fascinating to me. Like, for me, with my brother, I promise you would swear we didn't grow up in the same house. We're so different. And it's like, what has happened? Where did I know, when I left home, he left home, and we started, hanging out with different people, different crowds. But I think that, for me, it's big, eh? It's really, really big.
So if you take that as a starting point and you consider that school and society and religion try to put everybody into one and the same box, and then you wonder why a lot of people have issues with self-esteem, or think that they're stupid, or they're not sporty, all these beliefs that they've picked up along the way, when really it's just a consequence of the forced environment that we're in. So it's important that we have some structure and that we have boundaries, because we need that in order to be safe, right? But if we all want to get along a little bit better and be a little bit better parents to our kids, it's important to allow people to be diverse. It's important to allow people to have an autonomy, to have the quiet one, but to also have the one that asks questions, to have the one that's really good at maths, but to also have the one that goes, I don't like school, I want to be a basketball player. And that's okay, because some people are good at sport, other people are good with hands, and other people are good at school. And that's what makes the world such a beautiful place. But we're so busy trying to fit everyone into a box and ignoring everyone's human experience and then judging each other based on it, that all we're doing is re-traumatizing each other instead of celebrating the colorfulness and the diversity of it all. I love that you picked that up. Thank you for sharing.
I also want to add on to that, Frida, myself and my sibling, my brother, is also complete opposites. If you meet him, you wouldn't even say we come from the same household. But I also think, Veronique, that even if you grew up in the same household with the same situation, all of it is the same. We deal with situations, with our environments differently as well. I think
that's the nature part.
Yes, that's what forms the differences in us as well, is how we deal with the environment. Because you'd find perhaps two siblings growing up in a drug addict home. The one becomes a successful CEO and the other one becomes a drug addict. And that's really, I think, because you deal with the environment differently. So the trauma is different for each sibling.
And that's why it's so important to look at people as individuals. Because you might have one talkative one ambitious one, you might have one quiet and reserved one. So given an environment, you can see, even they've done experiments with plants, for example, where they have plants in 3 different rooms. I think they did it here at Wits actually. The same plant, well, not the same plant, but the same species of plant in 3 different rooms. And in one room, a group of people would come in and not say anything. They would just keep quiet and just stand there. You know, they wouldn't really do anything. There was just sort of presences. Then in the other room, there was a group of people that would come in and they'd kind of wipe the plant and water it and feed it and play gentle music and be loving and have good, happy energy. And in the third plant and room, they would get people to come in and like break a piece of the leaf off and put cigarette stumpies out in the plant and pour beer in there and like smoke and blow smoke and play heavy metal and be like screaming and shouting at each other. And those 3 plants fundamentally grew up and were affected very, very differently. They've done, like the one plant I think even died. And the other one flourished, and the other one was kind of comme ci, comme ça. They've taken teardrops or even like a glass of water, and depending on the energy of the room or the people in that room, if you take that water and you put it under a microscope, the water actually shows up differently than if you take water from the same tap or the same bottle in a room where there's a lot of dysfunction and shouting and screaming happening. So it's naive for us to think that we are so arrogant that we're all the same. But it's also naive and arrogant to think that our insignificant or perceivably insignificant existence does not have a profound impact on this entire existence that we call life. And I believe, without wanting to get religious, I believe that, you know, in the Bible, for example, it says we are born in the image of God. But to me, what that's saying is we have a responsibility because we are a teeny tiny version of this ocean of God, but we're all linked. So if I show up unkind in the world, it has an impact. You know, there might be a guy sitting in the traffic next to me who looks like a miserable douchebag, but I might be the difference between that guy going home and committing suicide versus the one that smiles at him and waves at him and maybe blows a kiss at him, that gives him just that little glimmer of hope to go, maybe not today. And I might never meet that guy. I might never speak to that guy. But that is the power that each one of us has within us. And if we are not aware of our thoughts and how our relationship is with ourselves in terms of thinking and words, then how can we be aware of our thoughts and how we're showing up in the world around us, and consequently the impact that we're having outwardly as well as physically, spiritually, and emotionally inwardly.
Thank you, Veronique. I think maybe we should ask some ladies in the room as well. We've heard a lot from the same ladies, but maybe to also
the ones with the camera on.
Yes, from the other ladies in the room, how did you find this session? Do you have any questions?
Yeah, what about Nsoko, Emily, Megan, Clementine, Candace, Ria, Malvinia, Angel?
Okay, from my side.
Okay. I'm sorry, it's Nsoko. I think this has been very enlightening and really just helped me to just reflect on, you know, showing up and understanding what you're going through, and what other people are going through. And, you know, show up as your true self and reflect on what is critical, for you to achieve what you want. You have actually touched on the unconscious, the conscious, and it's things that we are aware of, but really never take the time to really reflect on. And I think, yeah, for me, I'm taking it with me that it's critical to know, at what state of mind you are and how you show up in life. It's critical to, drive my own, I need to take charge and drive my own, what do you call
Be the
it?
captain of your own ship.
Yeah, be the captain of my own ship, honestly. Like you say, there are things that could have happened in the past that affect the way that I do things and patterns. I need to go back, reflect, and unpack my toolbox to see what works and what doesn't work. Thanks.
And get real with yourself. I love that. And thank you for saying what you said, because I think it touches on a lot of people think because they're born in poverty, that's their destiny. A lot of people think because they're born into a fat family, their destiny is to be fat, A lot of people think that because they're born a particular way, that is it. Or if they were told at school that they were stupid and they have a low IQ, they can never be successful, or that if you don't finish school or get a university degree, you can never be successful. These are all things that are put into us, but that are not necessarily true, because life happened before school, Life happened before there was such thing as money. Life happened before fat and skinny people. Oh, and those are politically incorrect words I shouldn't be using. Okay, forgive me for that. I hope nobody is offended by my straightforwardness. But the key is that the key is that we've got to kind of catch ourselves saying the things to ourselves that we do, or even repeating the things to ourselves, that victim space or whatever we find ourselves in, and go, is it actually true? And the truth is it isn't, because at any point that you're asking that question, you have the power to change it. And sometimes you don't need to go back. Sometimes you just need to take this moment now and go, I don't want this anymore. It's not working for me. What I want is X, Y, Z, and then start working towards making that happen.
Let's give Emily, she raised her hand. Emily, would you like to add on tonight? How was the experience for you?
Evening, ladies. Thank you, Shanae. Thank you, Veronique. Unfortunately, I joined in a bit late, but I could pick up from the comments as well. And some of the slides that you've shown there, that really the power is in how you control what you receive, what has happened to you, and how you're going forward, basically. So like Nsoko, I think Nsoko has said that what happened in the past doesn't necessarily mean that it determines where you're going or how you should perceive life. So those are the little bit that I picked up. I'm looking forward to listening to the YouTube recording so that I can get more of this. It was quite interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you for the affirmation. I think Candace also wanted to ask or share something.
Yes, I actually did. Something in one of your slides when you had the examples from 1 to 5, I fitted into example 1. I grew up in a family, not my mom and dad per se, but the people around me, where a female's position had to be domesticated very strongly. You weren't allowed to talk up, or you had to go in a specific direction for the careers and so on. And then came along Candace and her sisters, and we broke down every door we could think of. And we were judged for that, and like, no, you guys are overly achieving, basically, you're not going to get there. But we did. And my sisters and I are quite successful in our own, in our own identities. And practicing conscious living, I would label it like that. I started that about 5 years ago. And being in tough positions, executive positions, it broke me down in the beginning, to a level that I didn't think I could get to. But I had the right coaching, and being conscious about my thoughts changed my career completely, which took me to my current position where I'm at. And the moment I feel like something, why is this person getting to me, And I start asking myself these questions, and I start breathing, which helps me to come up with a very factual answer and very strong comeback. And that conscious living is a constant reminder. You got to constantly work at it. So I'm at that phase in my life, and I love it. It's a very healthy way of living. And I bring that home with my child and my puppies and my husband. So for me, I'm at that stage in my life, and it's changed a lot for me. So I just wanted to share that little snippet from my side.
Well, if I was wearing a hat now, I would salute you, because sort of opening up and being vulnerable and sharing what you did there isn't always easy, showing your humanity. But at the same time, it's showing that humanity that's also very inspiring. And that conventions can be broken in a gentle, compassionate way that doesn't involve war or killing or any of these extreme things. Although sometimes it may feel like that within. And I'm sure you would agree that even though you're aware of this and you have made a success from all of what you've described, both on an emotional, spiritual, and mental, as well as a business or worldly manner, the conflict never completely goes away, right? It almost like levels up all the time. So just when you think you've got somewhere, and life will throw you a curveball, or somebody will be sent into that boardroom that just presses that button or scratches that scar just one more time in a way that you're like, whoa, I haven't experienced that itch yet, Yeah.
One of my coaches had said to me, take a few seconds and breathe. Remember something, that person is showing you who they are. And you can really control the situation by controlling your reaction. And breathing, like I said, breathing helps me. They might just stare at me like, why aren't you responding quick enough? But that's something that I, yes. Well, that's something that I apply quite often.
My coach / mentor always said, practice the pause. And what he meant by that is like, take a breath and just go, because then people know you've heard them. They're not quite sure, are you going to keep quiet, or are you going to respond, or are you thinking, or are you formulating a question? But it's almost like Days of Our Lives dramatic pause. Something's coming, but you don't know what it is. But it allows you just to gather your thoughts and your emotions and formulate feedback that is aligned with who you are. But again, well done. The Indian culture has a strong thread of the shy submissiveness towards men and males. Even like not making eye contact and stuff. South Africa is not so bad, but in India itself, it's quite strong. Like the way you have to show up as a woman. So I love that we're having these conversations, because again, most people don't know that, and they might have thought that an Indian woman who's not making eye contact and being quiet has been rude, but really it's a cultural thing. So again, the more that we share and are willing to be vulnerable about these insights, the more we learn about each other.
Of course, definitely. I love this session. It was very enlightening for me as well. Yeah, maybe we'll have a chat offline.
That would be nice. That would be nice too. Yeah, we're having these every month. Some sessions are a little bit heavier, some sessions are a little bit lighter, and we really enjoy the conversation. So please join us again. I don't know if anybody else, Clementine, Ria, Angel, Malvinia, we haven't heard from you guys.
I just wanted to add, Veronique, to say, there's this saying that goes, every level has another devil. It feels like you've just achieved something, and then it's like, oh, now it gets even worse. Now you have to deal harder with it, and yeah.
It's
That's my motto for the year.
Yeah, it's like the game of life, right? Everyone's gaming now. Gaming's such a big thing. But the game of life, there's just never an end. Every time you think you've got somewhere, then life levels up and it throws you new lessons to deal with, you know? The other ladies are quiet, so maybe we can just check in one more time if anybody wants to add anything, and otherwise, yeah, I guess otherwise we're at the end of the session. For those who are obviously keen or would like to explore more personal stuff, I am here. It would obviously always be an honor and a privilege to work with anyone. And anybody that shows up for the WIMSA sessions or is a member of WIMSA or in these sessions, you guys obviously benefit from a 13% discount as well. And next month, we're going to be talking about the Enneagram, which is a tool used on a personal as well as a business capacity. Myers-Briggs was always the popular one worldwide, but Myers-Briggs has come a little bit under scrutiny these days. So Enneagram seems to be taking over. So I'm going to share with you guys the point of Enneagram, kind of where it came from, how it can help you understand yourself better, because we don't always have to go into big trauma heavy conversations, you know, with therapists and psychiatrists. This body is designed to know what to do. We just don't always know how to use it. So using different tools to explore, Enneagram is just one of them.
So the Enneagram will be on the 15th, or the session will be on the 15th of May. It will be the same time, and it will also be online. And perhaps, Veronique, if you can just pop your email address in the chat box. So for the ladies that would like to contact you individually and arrange individual sessions with you, that will be fantastic.
Or even just tell me how wonderful life is, or something that they've learned help them, because I like to actually just sometimes hear happy feedback or stories, because gosh, the world can do with a bit more of that.
Yes, so Malvinia said in the chat box, this was a wonderful session. Love the part about your words creating your world. Thanks for this. Yeah, and then Veronique has popped her email and cell phone number. So please, ladies, feel free to give us feedback on the WIMSA LinkedIn page. Once you see the YouTube link shared on all of the social medias, go pop a comment there, and go email Veronique to tell us how much you enjoyed tonight, and if you would like any discounted sessions from Veronique. Thank you for being so kind.
Or if there is a topic, like maybe there's a topic that you guys would love to talk about or learn more about, then also share that with us, because then we'll try and weave that in to one of the next or upcoming sessions.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
We'll see you at the next session on the 15th of May. It was lovely having you, and thank you for all of the interaction and discussions that we had for tonight.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.